Call the meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everybody who is here and who will be watching. We'll do a quick roll call before we do the Pledge of Allegiance. Jeremy Mask present.
Eddie Economic present.
Sarah Hughes present.
Roger Canoia present.
All right, and we were notified that Cindy Cassidy will not be here tonight. So we'll go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Interstate 35 Community School District exists to develop lifelong learners and responsible, productive, successful citizens in an ever-changing society. Our district priorities: number one, articulate and support a cohesive, student-centered pre-K through 12 vision for continuous school improvement. Number two, engage in effective teaching and relevant learning for the 21st century. And number three, operate with fiscal integrity, efficiency, and effectiveness. Everybody should have received the agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
I'll second that.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. The open forum, we don't have any residents here, but just for the practice of it, I'm going to go ahead and read the statement. Residents, students, parents, guardians, and staff members of the district may address the board about relevant topics. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speakers' participation is limited to 5 minutes per meeting. We ask that speakers remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees or students or their performance. The education spotlight tonight.
Yeah,
is-
so we're actually pretty excited. We're going to go on a field trip. We're going to go down to Mrs. Verdraska's life skills room. If you remember, this is, it was a classroom of sorts, and it's been changed, and we'll let you see what it's changed into. And the students are going to give you guys some food and kind of talk about what they do and how that room benefits them. So we want to head down to, we can just go down this hallway and out and across. It'll be the
Okay.
fastest way, I think.
All right, we're back. We just did our education spotlight down at Mrs. Verdraska's life skills class, which was a very pleasurable experience considering we got to eat. They did a great job. Thank Ms. Verdraska and the life skills class for having us. All right, the principal reports.
So Will sent me his report, so I'm going to kind of do
Oh,
okay, we do have a
in
student report.
conjunction, if that's
Perfect.
okay.
Nope, that's perfect.
He had just, these are some notes that he sent on to me to make sure that I communicated on. He really thought the NHS inductions went well. The Halloween decorations are up, as you've seen in the hallway and throughout some of our spaces in the district. He said the staff and students are really getting into the spirit of that, which is very nice for the culture of day-to-day. He did note some students are still bucking the system, if you will, when it comes to masks, but I think that's going to be a constant for us for a while. Schoology is getting better. He thinks that's because both sides, teachers and students, are getting more comfortable with it. Despite a few issues here and there, he says we have the hang of it. And then his last note was sorry for not being able to attend. So that was Will's report. I would just echo, the adjustment to the environment that we have so far this year. So NHS inductions is a perfect example of that. It's a great honor to recognize the students who has achieved the process that Ms. Good has created within NHS to do the applications and the selection process by committee, and I don't think those people get enough credit for the effort that they put in, the pack of papers that is sat on my desk of applications every year. I think my my best wishes go out to any student who applies for that, who takes the initiative to apply for it, and then ultimately gets inducted into that. It's a very nice honor. So that went on again this year. They did hold the reception off-site just because of the outside individuals coming in, and they were able to still gather in a larger space. So obviously the hallway decorations, and again, the student council has taken that on. They're going to work on offering a trick-or-treat option on Thursday and Friday to the various grade levels spread out. So they're doing a nice job of coming up with things to get people involved. Although we're inside right now because of the cold weather, it still gets people's spirits high to get involved and be active and that kind of stuff. So we're 9 weeks into the school year. I was talking to Ms. Steinlog the other day, and she had mentioned, we've got to find ways to celebrate, and I couldn't agree with that more. We've had 9 really good weeks of school. Yes, there are times that we all want to just turn and walk the other way, but I think we too often get caught in the ho-hum of what's going on because it's not the same as it once was, or it's different. But we've been able to be in school for 9 weeks, and we've had a very large number of kids be able to be here in person for the duration of that time, and as well as staff. So I think we have to celebrate being able to instruct kids in person as long as we have, and be thankful for that every single day, regardless of the circumstances. So I thank our staff for that. I thank the board and the parents and the students and everybody that's involved in making it happen, because I think we do have a lot to celebrate on a day-to-day basis. So that's my report for this month.
And I'll kind of share some of the same things as Steve. We're thankful for the nine weeks that we've had, and at the elementary especially, for the most part, the first 6-7 weeks we were pretty much unscathed. With very few kids out of the building. Unfortunately, it's kind of taken a turn these last couple weeks with all but one preschooler so far that's been quarantined. And we have one class that's ready to come back tomorrow, and one that left today. And so hopefully, knock on wood, that's the worst that we have. We do like to see some of the glimpses of normalcy on occasion. Preschool was able to go on a field trip last month to Harvest Barn. 3rd grade went on a field trip to Living History Farms. So any of those experiences that we can provide that give those kids that somewhat of a normal experience for the year is appreciated. This Friday we've got Halloween parties, which obviously are going to look different without all the parents and volunteers that are there, but like Steve said, student council is kind of stepping up and kind of creating some new opportunities for them. One of those, maybe a new tradition of kind of going around and trick-or-treating in different spaces, creating some internal competition between office decorations, which the elementary will win.
Wow.
Nobody knows, because my office is the only one done right now. So
saving the secrets for the last one. So no, we're looking forward to that, and just anything that we can do to try to have some somewhat normal experiences. We got conferences coming up here pretty soon. They'll obviously look different, with most of them being virtual. Some parents are still opting for those in person and kind of working out a schedule for that. But other than that, we're happy for being here as long as we have, and hope we can keep the ball rolling. So.
All right, thank you very much. Is there any questions for Mr. Kasser or Mr. Tessel?
Well, Mr. Tessel, last meeting I asked a little bit about the FAST scores. I know you just gotten done with the FAST testing after last meeting. Do you have any results or summary results or anything to kind of give us a feel of where that's at?
I don't obviously have it memorized.
Yeah.
As we expected, they're lower than normal.
Mhm.
I'll see if I can.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe you can just provide us something outside.
Yeah, I
of the
can shoot
meeting
an
or
email
something.
with that summary.
I'd just like to see kind of where that's at and kind of understand where we're headed with it.
Absolutely. So, but,
All right, thank you.
mhm.
All right. Does anybody else have anything? Then we'll move on to the superintendent report.
Yeah. So, a lot going on, as I think the principals alluded to, a lot of really exciting things and I think fun. We did, about a week ago, have a professional development, and the focus was our teachers and giving them opportunities to work with each other, work on the things that they needed to get to a point where they felt like they could take a breath, because that's sometimes hard. But one of the activities we did was to just kind of do a grateful or a thankful for what we celebrate, you know. And I have two that I'd like to share with you. They are both to the Board of Education, and these are from staff members. So to I-35 School District for making the school safe and trying to keep staff and students safe from this pandemic. Thank you. And the other one was to the school board and all administration. Thank you for all you have done to get us all back in person. Without your committed support, we wouldn't be as successful as we have been with our students. It has been a great year so far. So I think that, you know, all the actions that kind of everyone's taking during this time are very much appreciated. I think our kids really enjoy being here, and I think, you know, while, you know, I think Steve alluded to sometimes there's a little bit of a headache, it's definitely worth it. So I did want to give you an update on the Rsai fall meeting. They did talk about kind of the same things we talk about every year. On-time SSA funding was the number one. I think that's obviously first and foremost on everyone's mind as to where we are and what this next year will bring. And to make sure that's adequate, we're asking to provide a lot more services for kids, sometimes a lot more staff, as a result of this pandemic. So I know that's obviously at the forefront. They're still looking at the formula equity. They've worked on transportation to get that more equitable, and they've made some great strides there. But there's still a disconnect, and I think the projection is that in 2032, it would be equitable at the rate they're going. So they're trying to speed that up a little bit. They talked about increasing broadband and connectivity, I think for obvious reasons. And they talked about bonding capacity. I don't know if you remember, but when they changed that, they changed it to a supermajority instead of the 50+1, and they're wanting it to be the 50+1 for bonding capacity. So that obviously in rural schools sometimes has a big impact. And then
Supermajority 75%.
it's 60.
60?
Yeah. And then they talk about social emotional learning and just mental health for our staff and our students. So those were the kind of the big takeaways. By far the largest number of votes was the school funding. I mean, because all those others are directly impacted by that. So that's kind of how that meeting went. They did mention a couple of different times that how they approach it. So Margaret Buckton is the lobbyist for RSAI. She talked a couple of different times about how they will approach it depending on what happens November 3rd, which obviously makes sense. So I think more on that will be coming after the election, but that's kind of an update for that group. The other thing that I wanted to just mention, and I didn't put it on the agenda, but we got word maybe, I want to say last Tuesday, that there was a grant opportunity that was due Wednesday for some funding for social emotional and anything that might be mental health related. So Stephanie Brown and I got together and worked on a grant. We actually wrote it for, I want to say $65,000, and then they got back in touch with us that it had to be something that was being spent between now and the end of the year. So we had put things in that we had done up until this time, and it wasn't real clear in the grant, so they took those off. But we did get, I want to say, close to $30,000, and it's going to be used for mental health days. So we're going to take kids, and we've got some days, and we're actually planning tomorrow with Wildwood where we can take our kids out, and they're going to have different speakers in and do different things out at the Wildwood Center, just to kind of appreciate kids and let them be kids, and talk to them about all the kind of the strife, the unusual year that we're in. So we're going to do that for K-12 students. And then we also wrote in for Rose Dickinson's pay for the 2 days that she is adding here. And so they are going to supplement that through the end of the year for those 2 days. So great for our district. They also just let us know that because they awarded us the first grant, that we could add an additional amount to that, I think up to $10,000. So I, of course, have been brainstorming on what we need to do, but they're a great group to work with. So that's good for our kids.
Now, who's this grant from?
It's CICS. I'm not going to remember what it stands
No,
for.
I'm
It's
just
our,
curious.
we have a consortium of mental health support that we're actually with Boone County and Jefferson County. So if you think of the state of Iowa, it jumps from the northern part, and then it encompasses Madison and Warren. And I mean, Des Moines isn't included, so you actually jump all of Des Moines, and then we're included in this group up to the north. And so they receive CARES funding, and so they're distributing CARES funding for mental health services.
Wow,
So
that's awesome. Without
Yeah.
this grant writing process that we put in place,
Yeah.
what, 3 or 4 or 5 months ago, it would never happen.
right.
Good work.
So yeah,
Nice.
Stephanie Brown does a lot with that.
Good work.
We kind of tag team. It was due the next day, so we were kind of scrambling, but it was good. And then the last thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is the RTL, our Return to Learn team, met on Wednesday of this last week. And really, what was kind of prompting it is we were notified that when our first preschool class had to be quarantined, it was talked about that it might have impacted daycare. And if you understand our daycare about, almost all of our teachers that have school-age children that apply for daycare go to daycare. And so we were looking at the possibility of having 6 to 8 to 10 staff members gone if we would have had to quarantine our daycare. Luckily, it didn't work out that we had to, but I think it kind of put in the forefront that we're going to have a plan, because we have limited subs, but we're getting more, so that's good to hear. But we had to have a plan for what it would look like for still providing services if it were a teacher issue. We've been given real direct guidance on students. If you have this amount of positivity in the county and you have this many students gone, then they recommend you go to either a hybrid, or they recommend you go to a remote site. You apply for the grant or the application for that. But it didn't really give us any clarity on what happens if you don't have enough staff. And that's kind of where we were headed. What do we do? So the first meeting we had Wednesday was really designed around, okay, let's look at what we have in the building, what do we need, and then how can we use what we have, and how many people will that get us? Steve, you were in the group that was looking at the different categories. You want to talk just a little bit about that?
Of the subs?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see if I can pull up my list here real quick. We had 3 different categories of subs. We obviously have our subs that are here on a regular basis for us. So somebody that can sub in a classroom in a full-time manner. We had our sub list of coverage, I'll call it that. So I'll call them non-long-term solutions, and then we had very short-term solutions. So of those lists, we probably had, I didn't list pulled up here. You know, there's 35, probably 40 different options for us. Again, not in the long term, but we categorize them as our sub list or long-term options, short-term options, and then we listed them as a proctor option. So if we have a teacher who is quarantined, for example, if they choose or decide that they could or want to work from home, we could have an individual proctor that room, so they're there as a classroom monitor to allow the teacher to be able to still instruct in the classroom. And that worked out well for us today, actually in 2 different classrooms that I was a part of. So I thought that was pretty neat to see that play out. And again, is it a long-term solution? It can be, depending on the scenario that we're in, but it's better than a free day or a day for kids to catch up on work, because they're still getting instruction, they're getting feedback from their teachers. So from the secondary end, we've got some options there, but want to continue to try and figure out how the process for that, actually selecting who goes to those rooms or what the best scenario is. It's almost a one-off every time, but we still need to be able to get those people information if they are going to be filling in quickly.
Yeah, so as I'm sure you can imagine, there are lots of moving parts, lots of different periods. Some people have prep, some people have, other duties that they're assigned. So just getting that list and starting to solidify what that process looks like was the first step. We're going to meet again in early November, and that's going to be what is our threshold for having to move to some hybrid version. Our tenets for that right now are try and keep our youngest kids here as much as possible, and have our older kids who are a little bit more independent move to a remote option. If you remember, the hybrid, in a 2-week period, students have to be in the school 50% of the time. So whatever that looks like, you have to have students in the building 50% of the time over a 2-week period. So you could go a week on, a week off. You could go half days here, half days home. You could do any variety. You could do 3 days here 1 week, 2 days here the next week. So there's lots of different options, and lots of schools have done different things. But I think our first priority with that is to keep our littlest people here as much as possible. Simply because of our community and our daycare situation and kind of all of those variables that we know a lot of times if our little guys are home, our older guys are watching them, so it's one of those where you can't necessarily divide them necessarily by elementary is going to be here these days and high school is going to be here these other days, because a lot of time there's overlap and a need for them to be at the same place at the same time. So we will be working on what that hybrid model looks like. Most schools that I've visited with about this are in the same boat we are. They have an idea, but until it becomes necessary, they really don't have it penciled. And a lot of schools are not putting in a hard and fast number. And I think that obviously makes sense for a variety of reasons, because we don't know what the conditions are in any given situation, and it might not be true each time we do it. Just like when we look at our students that we're quarantining or the people that have to be isolated, it varies based on circumstances each time. And so I think the same would be true for a hybrid. But the ideal would be to keep as few kids remote as possible for as long as possible and still provide that quality education. So we will be working on that in early November. So we have the sub protocol that we're working off of, and we had to put it in place this weekend when we had another round of quarantines and several staff gone. So we're working our way through it. I just can't stress enough. I was talking to Mr. Mask. I can't stress enough how much we appreciate parent support, how much we appreciate the flexibility of our teachers, and just everyone knowing and recognizing that we are trying to do our best and really supportive of us. I just can't stress that enough. So I thank the public, I thank you guys. I know I don't tell you that enough, but it's been good.
So, okay, I just had a question with those subs. Is that like, if I typically am in this classroom and now that class is quarantined, am I going somewhere else, or am I also quarantined because I've been exposed?
It depends.
How does that?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, that's why I say every
Yeah.
situation is different. But yes, we have moved associates that were in classrooms that were quarantined. We have moved teachers that were in classes that were quarantined. I mean, our administrators, I was in a classroom today. I know Steve's been in them, Jeff's been in them. So the idea of proctoring, and we haven't talked a lot about this, but that's really supervision. So we talked, Ted could be in a classroom proctoring if we needed him to. Not a long-term solution, but could like a Mike Stewart be on camera telling kids what to do and how to do it, and Ted just be in the room to make sure there aren't any challenges or questions, and that's a viable option. So each scenario is different, but yes, we're using all resources. So as soon as somebody gets put on the list as either a class that's been quarantined and they are not, for whatever series of reasons, they become part of our sub pool, so to speak. So if we have a need somewhere, they're assigned to it. And they've been, I mean, teachers have been good about that, and they know. I went in, I was working in Spanish today, and Mr. Young, he must have had a prep period, and he was in there, he volunteered to take the Spanish class, and they were talking in Spanish, and I said, okay, you're getting more here than when I would be here. But Mrs. Sanchez had already had her lessons already on there, and really just kind of the kids are pretty independent, and they kind of ran the class and helped each other and asked each other questions and worked through it. And so that kind of level of people stepping up, and we've had just so many stories of teachers that have done hundreds of little things to help our kids and our families, and it's really heartwarming. I mean, I hate to say that but they do it all the time. I think now they just kind of they're amplified sometimes, which is, I think, good. But so we will get more and actually bring the hybrid plan once that'll be at the November meeting. We might have to enact it before we meet, but that'll be just as needed.
Well, thank you, Sharon. I do want to just stress from my perspective that you went over what the school employees are doing, how they're doing their part. I would just like to stress that students also need to do their part by wearing their mask properly, by being respectful of everybody around them, because it's not just about them, it's about everybody else. And as we go through this and we start doing more indoor activities, we have the privilege of being at the school. We're very lucky to be where we're at with the numbers, and unfortunately they're going the wrong direction right now. And I can't stress it enough that it will take everybody, including the student body, to wear their masks properly, so that when we have to look at quarantining, we don't have to look so far. So.
Now, is the quarantine procedures changed with the governor's recommendation, or is it still the close contact is deemed with?
They have changed a little bit, and this is, I think, sometimes confusing.
Yep.
So the way it reads now is if you are within 6 feet of someone who tests positive and you are wearing your mask properly and the student who tests positive is wearing their mask properly, then the student who tests positive is the only one who has to isolate. The other kids can stay in school and continue. If either one of those two, either the student that tests positive or the student that's within 6 feet, does not have their mask on properly, over their nose, fitted on their face, then they both have to quarantine. One has to isolate for the duration of their positive case, which is 10 days. The student who is quarantined has to quarantine for 14 days. So it's a little tricky because we have kids that really are doing the right thing. They're wearing their masks properly, but unfortunately, in certain circumstances, they have to quarantine. Now, part of that's lunch, part of that, there are just some of those scenarios that we can't avoid it. But that's one of the things I would say we've seen a lot of kids really kind of pick that up and really understand that they're impacting other students now with their decisions. And we're seeing kids, I think, being a little bit more responsible and really kind of helping with that understanding that we need to be wearing masks properly to keep as many kids here as we possibly can.
Because before, in the old quarantine procedures, I could only hurt myself
No,
by not wearing my mask.
No, everybody quarantined regardless of masks.
Yes, right.
Yes.
But in a way, I was only hurting myself.
Or anybody that was around you.
Well, but they were going to get close contact no matter what if they were around me.
Correct.
So if I was not wearing my mask properly, it was only hurting me.
Correct.
In the quarantine procedure, right?
Correct.
It might have been.
Correct.
But now, if I'm not wearing my mask properly, it's me, it's Sarah, it's this person, it's this person. So it's more of a team effort rather than. And I'm glad that they at least have, done that much to show that mask wearing, if the CDC recommends it, is at least being taken into account. So,
Right.
Okay.
And they also did a better job of defining the 15 minutes too, correct?
Yes. Now it's 15 minutes for any span of time. It doesn't have to be consecutive.
Which is logical.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And that's kind of how we interpreted
Mhm.
it anyway. I mean,
Okay.
because there's no magic number that says 15 minutes and then you're good or you're bad. We
It
just
stops
used
the
it as-
14-minute rule.
Right,
that-
right.
Yeah.
I think it eliminated a lot of that conversation, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
And as we move into basketball and wrestling season, you know, it's going to be important that the students, the staff, and everybody involved who comes in the building are doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, I don't know if this is the right time. I guess I am interested to see what our public policies and procedures are going to be for the winter sports. I know the Iowa High School Athletic Association has come out with theirs, but obviously we're going to have to do quite a bit of communication and over communication and communicating again and again what our
Yes.
expectations are going to be for that.
Yeah, and you know, obviously it's a little different because like volleyball, indoor sports,
Mhm.
and I don't know if the public knows this, but we did limit the number of people based on how many we could have in the gym that would be able to sit with families and still be 6 feet apart. And I anticipate we'll follow the same guidelines. Now, the state, I mean, I read theirs and they're very vague, kind of what they gave us. You know, that we have to take extra precaution with hygiene. We have to, you know, make sure we've got things sanitized and those kinds of things. But they just say, you know, monitor or regulate crowds and based on facilities, which is understandable. Some places can do a lot more. But I anticipate Mr. Smith will have that guidance out as we get ready to start our first round. Our trick is usually middle school, to be quite honest. And I know that there's been conversations about having middle school games in the high school gym just so that we can spread people out more. But it's going to be a matter of what the scheduling looks like. We have talked about having 7th grade parents only in when 7th grade is playing, and then having 8th grade parents only in when 8th grade is playing, just so we can spread people out. So more will be coming on that. And that'll be communicated to the public as well in lots of formats, as you said.
Keegan had mentioned the last time they had their conference ADs meeting that they were working on some potential conference guidelines, which I think would be awesome if the conference would or is able to come to some consensus on things. I don't know how realistic that is with some expectations being clear this way and the others being clear this way. I don't know that they'll find some, even if there's common ground in some areas, I think that would be beneficial for not just us, but consistency of our patrons that go to other conference games, so they don't have to ask what guidelines are. They know here are the conference guidelines regardless of where we're at.
Yeah, I know it isn't new to say, but it is extremely disappointing that our conference has not done anything with that yet. And we need to continue to put any pressure we can on them through the athletic director or any means possible to get a unified front so that, you know, we're protecting our kids and our communities.
And I think the challenge, and I'm not making an excuse by any stretch,
Mhm.
but some boards have said they're not going to require masks in school.
Mhm.
So they're saying it's hard for us to require masks at an event outside, you know,
Yeah.
a school-sponsored event, which I mean, probably rightfully so. But it does put us in a tough spot when we do require. And so, yeah, I know they're working on it, but as Steve said, when you're kind of on the both ends of the spectrum, it makes it a little bit more challenging, so.
And I'll probably get, it's probably not a popular thing to say, but should we only be playing schools that do require masks?
And we've talked about that. We've talked about, you know, we have some, you know, volleyball teams that won't travel if the school doesn't require masks. We have, I would imagine we'll have some regulations around wrestling the same way. So it's definitely worth considering, because I do think it's important for people to understand that when community gets together, if they're not protecting themselves, they're harming everyone at that activity, in their homes, and then kids come back to school, which I understand. We want to try and give kids as many opportunities as we can, but at the same time, we have to be responsible about how we're doing that. So I do think that is a great conversation. And Keegan and I can kind of throw that out there with some of the other conference schools and see where they are. We've talked about limiting the number of teams we play. There has been talk in the conference about having some schools just play the same group of teams, so that instead of playing all 9 of the schools in the conference, you play the same 4 2 times, so that you're not, you're limiting spread. It could be 4 other schools that require masks, that kind of thing. So there's been talk. Unfortunately, I haven't seen a lot of action, so.
Okay.
It'd be interesting to know how many other schools, if we only played the schools in our conference that require masks, how many would that limit? Would that only take out 3 basketball games? Or
I would say it's
4
probably
basketball
about 50-50.
games?
Yeah, I would say they require them. I know there's a lot of strongly encourage, strongly recommends, but not require.
Haven't we seen some schools move during the year to require them?
Yes,
And
yes.
so that number is actually changing, I think.
Yes, and I think that's a result of the governor's, guidance about if you have the mask on properly and the person next to you does, then you don't have to quarantine. So I think schools are moving in that direction for that reason.
Okay. Any other questions for the superintendent, or do you have anything else?
No, thank you.
All right.
I guess I had one question real quick. Do you have any update on Apogee?
Apogee?
Yeah.
Apogee?
Just how that's going since we have that hard
Jeff actually
commitment?
Yeah, Jeff is working on that with Julie Cordick, so I will let you. Jeff, do you have a quick update for us on that?
Yeah, we've had several webinars with them. We had to work through some of the processes of, we had to become an Apple App Store developer program. Even though we're not developing the app, they're developed on our behalf, but it's basically all the paperwork is that we're app developers. So we had to do some stuff with that to get approved. Ted had to help me and verify that yes, we're an official agency, and I know we took some calls to do that. We had our very first preliminary training last Thursday in a webinar. Again, that's Julie and I, to kind of go through some of the setup pieces. We set up an import from PowerSchool into Apogee, so that when we have, say, something that we want to blast out, and that's again the benefit of the app is push notifications and stuff like that. It's kind of a one-stop shop where we can push to Facebook, Twitter, text, call, website, and there's a 6th one I can't think of right now. There's 6 avenues that we can push out at once. So it has that syncing with PowerSchool to pull in names and addresses. One of the questions that have come up through this process is currently we use a different service called School Messenger to push out those notifications that we got an early out for weather or a late start for snow. Are we double dipping if we have both services? What are the pros and cons? Kind of doing some weighing on that. Do we just ditch the one and I'll go all in on the other? Is there enough benefit to keep both? So those are some questions we're still working on answering. But they have started the developing. We went through as kind of an admin team a week or 2 ago with some different samples. Kind of picked a la carte of some of the features that we like of the different samples. We've shared those with them, and they're in the process of integrating those, and then I'm sure we'll have another webinar this Thursday. It seems like every Thursday we meet with them, and hopefully they'll have some more demos to kind of show us. And I know that one time when we met, the last time we were talking Thanksgiving, I don't see that as an impossibility. I mean, we're seemingly moving pretty quickly on this. Even if we just had the skeleton of the website ready to roll out, and then we can work on informing the public of the app, and we're making some progress.
I wrote down Thanksgiving again. That's all I heard. No, I do one thing. I'm excited about it. I would really like to see something just like a celebration or really a launch, blast it out, and let the whole community know that this is a new thing that we're excited about, and it's going to benefit the parents, the community, the kids, everybody through this process. Just let's advertise it and get it out there to them. But thank you.
All right. Any other questions, comments? Not hearing any, we will move on to our consent agenda items. Everybody should have gotten a copy of the past meeting minutes, the board bills and financial statements with the addendum that was handed out this evening. And then we had some resignations and contracts that we do need to go through. Heather Dutry hired as part-time assistant principal for the secondary. Jerry Young resigns as middle school robotics advisor. Zach Waldbacher is head middle school girls track coach. Jesse Baldwin is hired as middle school assistant girls track coach. Casey Howe is hired as middle school assistant girls basketball coach. Ronald Hartfield hired as assistant robotics coach. And Julie Kordick was hired as the middle school robotics coach. And then we did have open enrollment.
I don't think we had any this month. I leave it on there each in case we get one, but I don't think we had.
Okay. One of those I didn't get to open, so. All right, so for the consent agenda items, we will need a motion and a second to approve.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda items.
I second that.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda items. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Early retirement discussion. This is for discussion only tonight.
Yeah, so last year, we were asked to give you guys a little time to kind of work through what the funds were, where our balances was, and so, or what our balances were, so that you could kind of weigh how we've done early retirement and maybe have a discussion about if you wanted to continue to do it that way, if you wanted to continue to offer it. So I just wanted to put it on the table and get you the information. So in your information, we have the two documents that you will need. The first one is last year's early retirement document, which is really small here. And I guess I would just remind you that the 55 age, so under the eligibility requirements that we've used for the last few years, I think this was used prior to me, but the eligibility requirements, the 15 years of service is something that the board decides. You can make that 5 years, you can make it 20 years, you can make it whatever you want it to be. The employee being 55 years of age, you don't have a choice on. They have to be at least 55. Now, if you want to offer options to people that are younger than 55, there are other mechanisms we can use to do that, but it's not really retirement. And then they have to be eligible to retire and receive benefits from the Iowa Public Employee Retirement System, or IPERS. And then there's been some changes as a result of COVID, actually, that make some of this a little outdated. Like, I don't think that there's really a length of time now that you have to wait before you can start working in a district. Or at least that's the conversation that they're wanting to have with SAI and Iowa School Board Association and some of those other lobbying groups, because we see teachers that retire and then could come into the profession again and help schools out, whether it's a half a year or a year. And under the current system, they have to wait 4 months from when they retire before they can work in a school again. And I think they're saying that they want to take that away so that they can start right away, because we have such a shortage. So I think there's been a little bit of work on that. I don't want to tell you exactly what it looks like. I will have it at the November meeting, but I know it's been a conversation and a lot of traction as a result of COVID and not having enough subs. So this is the structure that we created when I first came, and really the thought process, I'll give you a little bit of background, was previously different teachers were given different packages for different reasons. And the board has the right to do that as much or as little as you want. The challenge we have is if you look at our management fund, which is where this comes out of, I'm going to leave it sideways if that's okay with you guys, because I don't want to try and... So just do this. But the
Or just turn your
management...
computer, we'll turn the whole
Yeah,
thing.
turn it computer, whatever.
Or I do.
But the management fund, where this comes out of, if you look right now, and Ted's probably going to be a better person to walk through this than I am. And I have to come on this side of the...
He's more crooked or what?
I don't know.
No, this one's fine. We'll start with this. But what we have is, this first one is insurance. We know what that's going to be, and we estimate, each year that increasing a little bit. So we know we have that money coming out already. This $88,851 is what we have still being paid out from 4 years ago for the different contracts that we had arranged for early retirement. So next year that decreases to about $60,000, the next year about $30,000, then $23,000, and then the last year $4,000. So we've got that on our books for the next 5 years. And that's one of the things that I guess has me a little concerned is if we do it that way, we really are putting future boards, future administrators kind of in a bind, because we've got $90,000 already committed of our management fund, and that doesn't even apply to people that we're offering early retirement to now. So that's why when I first kind of proposed what I did for our package, it was so we know how much we're paying this year, we pay it this year, and we're done. There's the hamster.
Yeah.
So that is the category that as we go on, it'll start to decrease. We anticipated 2 or 3 early retirees. Our plan was about $30,000 or $30,000 of an HRA, which can be used by that employee for health insurance or health expenses. And on our plan currently, that's a little less than 3 years of paying for the health insurance. So as our rates go up, obviously that number decreases a little bit, but it's about 3 years. So we're looking at, if we have 2 people take it, we're taking $60,000 out. So you can kind of see where we get the numbers from, but I just wanted to explain what those numbers were already, just because we have some that are already set for us that we can't change.
And the previous way of doing things was based as a percentage of salary, numbers of years of service, and then years of kind of insurance. And so these usually are insurance, the cost of insurance for people who have retired, right? I mean, most of these trailers are.
I assume so.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's, I don't know, I assume. I
Yeah,
don't
and
know.
the 30,000 that you arrived at, or we arrived at last year, was kind of an average of what we had been done in the past, or it was a guideline, so
Correct.
that's how we kind of came up with that number.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
Right, so when I asked Ted to look for me, we have, using the same criteria, so using the criteria of 15 years in the district of continuous full-time experience, 55 years of age, eligible for APERS, we have 10 teachers that would apply or that would qualify for early retirement. So we ran a couple of scenarios, and I will pull one up that Ted shared with me. If we're using the same kind of mechanism, you can see...
Can you make that bigger, please?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, let me open
I'll make my eyes younger.
it.
It's easy.
We'll all just move up.
Yeah, just up to the screen. And again, this is just one option. I mean, there are districts around us that do not offer early retirement each year. There are some that do it sporadically. There are some that offer $5,000. I mean, you can make it whatever you want it to be. If you wanted to offer $100,000, you could offer $100,000. It's entirely up to you. But you have these parameters, right? You don't have an unlimited fund. I know some districts that don't offer it and build their funds so that when they really need to offer it, they can offer a really nice package and people say, oh, yep, that now's the time. But that's a different kind of mechanism, more for cost savings. So we just figured if we put $250,000, which is what we put in this year for property tax input, and then we had all the money coming out that we had talked about, and then we had $150,000. So saying 5 teachers wanted to retire at the $30,000, what would that do to our budget? So if you want to increase that to $50,000, if you want to decrease that to $20,000, you can kind of see how it works. And we can put any numbers in there. But the 55 you don't have flexibility on, but everything else you do. In a general sense, I'm sure there are some rules somewhere that we'll have to be specific on, but.
When do we set the date to allocate property tax for 21-22?
By April 15th.
April 15th.
That's the due date.
So we'll have insight into how many want to early retire before we set that levy.
Right.
Or that, not a levy, it's how we allocate. Is it a levy? It's part of the levy?
It's
You
part of
divvy
it.
up the levy.
Yeah, it's part of it.
Okay. Because obviously with COVID and everything, my concern is that all 10 go, I'm out. This is, quite a year.
Right.
I'm not doing it next
Right.
year. And then that way we,
And that, my info would be that wouldn't be in the best interest of the district to
Right.
see all of your veteran teachers leave.
yeah, at one time.
And you can limit
And I
it.
think-
I mean, you could say the first 6 that apply.
I was gonna say,
I think
didn't last year we do 2?
It depends on how much money you want to allocate. If you want to do 150, you say the first 5 that apply, this is the start date. Turn them in the district office, and the first 5 that apply are who are eligible.
And the way we wrote it last year was up till 7 was 30, and then above that, it was diminishing returns.
Yes.
I still think we need to be making sure we understand what is our goal with our early retirement package. Really, there's 3 different things that you can really talk about with early retirement. Is it an incentive, like you're rewarding teachers who've been here for a long time? Are you wanting to save the district money? Or, are we trying to move on and get younger teachers?
Those are the 3 goals, right?
Right.
Incentive, save district dollars.
And I think your goal may change from year to year too, of what the reason you're offering it, right?
Right.
Hence, when she said some districts don't do it, and then they save up the money and
Mhm.
offer a. I feel having, the way we've done it the last couple of years has been, I think, a lot more advantageous for everybody than the way we had been doing it before, where it was, we have these trailers going on, and we don't have that at this point. Well, we still do, but we're working our way out of it, so.
So last year you did give us a list. You just said 10 people were 10
Met the quote.
10 people have met
Yeah.
the criteria. You gave us kind of a list of blind list of their ages and things
And I
like
have that as
so,
well.
So
I
that
mean,
we can, I think that would be good because we aren't really deciding anything until
Right.
November. If we're going to try to set a number as a cap, which maybe we will, to understand what that is. Do we have 8 of them that are at 64 years old, 65, 66? I think that'll make a difference.
Yeah, you have, and I can just tell you even that number right now. You have 1, 2, 3 that are 62, 1 that's 61, 2 that are 60, 159, 257, and 155. So you don't have anybody over 62. But I will share this. But again, this is based on the idea of 15 years of service. If you diminish that number of years, let's say you go 12 years of service, it might add fewer people. If you go to 20 years, you would take 1, 2, 3, 4 people off the list. So it just depends on how you want to. So Ted, can you email that list to them?
Sure.
Thank you.
Right now.
Sure. And I think the total cost he has on there is if we did the 30,000. Just so we did what we would have if we used the same process we used the last year, but that is arbitrary. You can change that.
How is the ratio of teachers older to younger? Is it versus other districts? Is there a perfect ratio to be at, to incentivize younger teachers? I don't understand those dynamics. I understand them a little bit at my place of work, but in a school, I have, ratio of older teachers to younger teachers, is there a perfect balance? I don't know. That's a pretty subjective, right? A good teacher, it doesn't matter their age.
Right, right. I think obviously the advantage for the board is cost savings, right? Let's say my highest teacher is $70,000 a year. I get a new teacher in at $38,000 a year. That's significant cost savings. Now, we in this district have a tough time hiring a new teacher just out of school. We typically look for people who have a year or 2 or 3 of experience because one of our challenges is teachers leaving. And so we want to create some consistency. So if we've got a teacher that's got 5 or 10 years of experience but wants to be here, we're more than likely to pay extra for their contract so that we can create that stability. So even though it may look like a $30,000 or $40,000 savings, it might actually be a $20,000 savings because we're still trying to make sure we have quality instructors, and a lot of times they have experience because we want to try and diminish the number of teachers that are leaving. Jeff, Steve, any comments about kind of Eddie's question? I mean, you're dealing with the teachers more one-on-one.
You hit on really the only thing that I was going to add there. To me, it's not that balance of years of veterans versus non-years of service. It's just that consistency from year to year. It's how can we retain over 2 to 3 years and then they look to go elsewhere. I mean, it's more about that retention piece for me. So the more people we can keep here, the longer, the better. I think the better connections you make with kids and families in the community. I mean, the benefits certainly outweigh the. So I would agree with Sharon that since we might pay up a little bit for years of experience, if someone is embedded in the community.
We've had some really good teachers come in they're really young, fresh out of college, or a few years in, and then 3 years in we lose them to a district that's either closer to where they live or paying more. So it's that retention piece is everything.
So I would ask if you need something, you want data, you want us to run some scenarios, just let us know, and we'll get that to you as soon as you ask us for it. Ted can kind of create the spreadsheets, and we'll send those to you. Possibilities, if you're thinking, what if we do this? Throw it to us, and we'll work through it. And so then in November, you can have whatever options you want to see and kind of relevant data with the teachers that we currently have.
And if I remember right, last year when we were talking about this, one of the goals for wanting to talk about this early is so that we try to set up something so we can maintain a little bit of consistency from year to year too, so we're not completely turning the plan upside down every 2 years or 3
Right.
years. Or
And doing it early also helps tremendously with hiring. I mean, I can't stress that enough. I mean, if we can get an advertisement out in January and start doing interviews in February, March, that puts us a leg up a lot of times in some of those hard to fill positions. So
Is there any reason we wouldn't allocate $250,000 to the management fund next year like we did last year?
no, not that we can think of. I mean, if you remember, part of what we did is we increased the amount that we had in debt service.
Yeah.
And so we paid off part of the back end of our debt
Yep.
this year. So you do have, I think, some flexibility in that. What is the management fund? What's the cap it can be at? Do you remember?
There is no cap.
For for debt service, I'm sorry, I might have said management.
4.05,
Yeah.
$4.05.
Right.
I think that's the cap.
That's the cap. So you have some limits around what you can do with debt service, but if you want to still continue that same kind of keeping the tax rate the same and everything else being constant, and like I said, we'll know more about that in the next couple of months. But I don't foresee any reason why we wouldn't be able to do the 250. If you want to increase that a little bit, we could consider that. It obviously wouldn't help us for this year, but it would help us going forward.
I just don't want to make a decision that forces us to put more in the management fund just because of this, because it would be, I think, irresponsible a little bit. Okay.
What we really wanted to show was that if you did nothing, if you did zero there, we'd still be okay, right? We'd still
Depending on how
positive.
many you paid out.
On 5, but on a
Yeah,
10,
depending
it
on
would
how many you
be-
paid out.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's 5 at 30.
Not that we're pushing that, but.
Right. No, understand. You wanted a worst case scenario, and I think that's the best way to illustrate that. Okay.
And the other thing, just as a reminder, our unemployment claims come out of this, which could look different in any given month. And so getting this to 0 is not ideal either. So just kind of a note that the goal is not to balance this out at 0. The goal is to have some money in there because we do need some for unexpected increases, workman's comp,
Yeah, we've
some
seen
of those
workman's
things.
comp. We've seen a good trend in workman's comp, and if we were to see it to revert back to previous levels, it
Right.
could be.
Right.
Yeah, maybe we didn't estimate high enough, but
Yeah.
we
no.
can react to it.
But it's a reasonable.
Right.
All right, any other discussion on the early retirement scenarios? Not hearing any, we'll move on to the enrollment data.
I guess, sorry,
Oh.
the one last one I would have, if I could go back.
Go right ahead.
Last year, you had an idea of maybe teachers that had come to you proactively on an early
Yeah.
retirement package. Do you have a number that might have?
I have a few.
Okay.
I would say there's probably 4, maybe 5 that are seriously considering it.
Okay, that's helpful.
But I mean, we have not talked to any of them
Right.
formally.
No.
I've had 4 or 5 just mention, hey. So,
Yeah, no, and I mean, that's one of the considerations I think is very
Right.
important, because as
Right.
we're looking at the financials and trying to figure out, and do you think 4 or 5 out of the 10, would that be disruptive if all of them accepted it? Again, more to the, it's another way to ask.
it's more about hiring.
I would
Right.
say it all depends on when, because of that very thing. Because
Okay.
I know some of those I have had conversations with that said, if you come to me in April and tell me you're going to retire, I'm going to tell you no way. And obviously that can't happen. But if we go shop, if we advertise in April for certain positions, we will get 0 applicants, and that's not just an I-35 thing. That's a
Statewide.
statewide thing. So I would say the sooner the better in any of those scenarios, because I'd also like for them to be a part of who we hire, because they've either created a program or we want to make sure that we get a quality applicant and replacement back for what we lose.
Okay, that's very helpful.
And that's
Thank you.
another advantage of this, is getting that commitment early, I guess, of,
Yeah.
because we had January 8th or January 14th last year was the deadline.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to give them Christmas so that
Mhm.
they can meet with
Yep.
financial planners or whomever they need to, so they can use that time to work out what they need to see if it's an option. But-
Force them to spend more time with the family to see if they really are ready to retire.
Well, there's that too.
Okay.
You don't think the last year's given them plenty of time
Oh,
with family
yeah.
to...
My wife wants to be back at work, I can tell you that. Okay. And then, so you're saying the board better be ready to act by November? so
At
that
least
we
by
can get-
December.
Yeah. So
At
we
least
can-
by
okay.
December. So we
I
can bring
just-
the proposals November if you're ready, that's fine. I wouldn't probably change the timeline though, because I think Christmas is a good time for
Yep.
them to meet. So I think if we take action at the December meeting,
Okay.
that would be very beneficial, but we can come with different scenarios and then we can run them again
Yeah.
between November and December. But I do think January, having that, being able to post towards the end of January really does help us. So
Okay.
that's kind of the target.
That's excellent, thank you.
All right. Eddie, anything else?
No, I'm done,
Okay.
promise.
All right, is there anything else on the early retirement, folks? If not, we'll move into the enrollment data for discussion only.
Yeah, so we certify our enrollment, we do our count October 1st. And this year was a little different. I don't know if I can say that correctly, Ted. Typically, how we look at it is we look at the number of students that graduate, and then the number that are in our kindergarten.
Yeah.
That gives us a pretty good idea of where we fall. But this year is, like I said, is just a little different. And Ted will correct me if I'm wrong, because
Can you zoom
he's
that just
good
a
at
little?
that.
Can you zoom it just a little bit?
Yep, I'm gonna try and put it down.
Sorry.
That's your job, Ed.
Yep, that's his
Oh.
job. That's what I tell him.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. So when you look at the resident public students attending our district, we're actually down 21 students, almost 22 students. So that could be a large number of students graduating and a small number of students coming into kindergarten. If you look at the resident public students attending another Iowa public school, this would be open enrollment out. Our numbers are actually down. So we have either several seniors that were open enrolled out that have graduated, or we have students that are back that chose not to open enroll out. So we actually have less students open enrolled out. If you look at the non-resident public students attending your district, these are open enroll in. And so we have about 21 students open enrolling in that we didn't have last year. So our number of open enrolled out is less, our open enrolled in is greater, but we're in COVID. And I only say that because we have several of our resident districts that are homeschooling.
Yeah.
And so as a result of homeschooling, they're not out, they're not in, they're just homeschooling. So we don't see funds unless they're what we call dual enrolled. So if they're taking a class here, then we get some funding for them, but it's not full funding. So when you put all those numbers together, we actually are serving 0.02 students more than we did last year. Which is good, in the sense that our number is not negative, because last year what were we down? Do you remember?
No, I can't tell you.
Then I'm gonna not remember it off the top of my head.
It
but
wasn't much.
I will look at it. 3 or 4, I
Yeah,
was
it's-
thinking.
I can pull it up.
I did include on your information, try and pull up.
Oh, yeah, it's on that sheet.
Maybe I didn't include it. Did I
Yeah,
include
it's on page 2.
Oh, that's right. I keep thinking
ready
it's
to
a
turn
number.
your head again?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, shoot.
no.
Yeah.
Let's make that just a little
Hey,
bit.
Jeff, how does she rotate that easily?
Right click.
No,
So
I
PDF.
tried everything on this. You
It
can't
doesn't?
do it.
Yeah. I
Not-
don't think it's.
Oh, that worked out fine.
It's the Google.
Yeah, there you go.
It's the
But
Google
I'll
issues.
just highlight for you some of the things that I think are worth noting. So these are schools that are in our Heartland AEA. So some of them are very large and some of them are very small. So what I do is I look for districts that are probably in the same circle of proximity to Des Moines. So I think of Earlham, I think of Pleasantville, I think of us. You know, so I look at kind of that outer circle and I look at their enrollments to see what they're doing. And they're very similar to what we're doing. You know, you look at some of these that are growing, 26.3% increase for Bondurant Farrar. Closer circle to Des Moines, right? So we're seeing some growth there. But if you look at the ones that are in that next ring out, you can kind of see we're all about the same. I would say Van Meter is probably an exception to that, but I would also say they're a little closer to Des Moines than we are. When you look at Waukee, which I think most people assume is kind of Des Moines. So they might be an exception. But I just wanted to share this with you so you could see kind of our trends over the last couple of years. And we're the gray here, kind of in the middle. And you can see where we were and where we are now. And I think you can probably understand that we've had several classes of 70, 75 students that have graduated, and our incoming classes are 40, 45, 50. So you're losing several kids each year just because of the number of kids that are here as opposed to how many were here before.
Are we seeing bigger kindergarten classes because of the preschool, or because of the daycare, or some of the ancillary services we offer?
Yeah, I think we're seeing kids stay here. So I had asked, because one of the things that I had Ted and Lori do is I asked them to kind of give me a comparison of a cohort, like a typical cohort. So in 2017, our kindergarten class was 38. The next year it was 35. The next year was 37. This year it's 35. So that's a small class, but it's not changing much. You know, it's up a student or down a student. You look at who was first graders in 2017, 47, 51, 49, 46. So I kind of dug into that a little bit, and we're seeing some of those numbers down because of homeschooling. So you get one or two students that are typically in class, and now they're homeschooled. That does have an impact. So if we didn't have 12 families homeschooling this year, our enrollment would be up 12 students, 12.02, right? So the one that always kind of amazed me was we had several kindergarten students, but then we kept seeing a drop, and I wondered why, and it's because of our transitional kindergarten program. So we would have, let's say we had 51 students last year, 2019 in kindergarten. This year we only have 39 in first grade, but the 11, with the exception of 2 that are homeschooled, are actually in kindergarten because they were in transitional. We count transitional and kindergarten the same. So they're actually in a second year of kindergarten. They were in transitional, now they're in the regular kindergarten program. Some of those kids in transitional go to first grade though, so that's why it's not a one-to-one match. It doesn't mean that if you're in transitional, you automatically go to kindergarten.
So we just count them again the next year.
You count them again the next year. The intent though, and I think this is one of those things that we've talked about before, is your transitional kindergarten program has to be set up to move those kids to first grade if possible. You can't just add an extra year of school and get funding for it. So the intent is the curriculum needs to be similar. Now you can focus more on things like behavior skills, you can focus on certain academic areas, and if you've got kids ready to go, then they need to go to first grade. But if they're not ready, then we move them into kindergarten. It's not the exact same curriculum, but it's just the next layer up. So, Jeff, how many would you say that we lose, or how many would you say move on to first grade? 6 maybe of the 14?
Yeah, if you've got 14 in the class, then figure 8 to kindergarten and 6 to first grade, probably, give or take.
Yeah. So, it's working, but it does make our numbers look a little convoluted when we see that many in kindergarten, knowing that some of them are going to do a repeat of kindergarten. But yes, I think we're seeing more retention of students. We see a lot of kids coming in. I want to say several of our open enroll in were in kindergarten. So in theory, they're going to be with us now for 12 more years, which helps, you know. So I just wanted to give you an overview of that. There is talk right now during COVID of having a second count day. Typically it's only ever October 1st, but I think some of our larger districts are pushing for a second count day because they think they're going to get kids back from homeschooling, and so they want to be able to count them. Obviously it's significant. It's about $7,000 per student. So if we had 10 kids come back at $7,000 per student, it makes a difference. So I don't know that they're gonna, I don't know that the legislation is gonna go for that, but They might.
The certified enrollment in 18 was 860. And then last year it was 848. And this year it's 812. The number served was 800, and then it dropped to 792.9 and 792.9.
So we get paid off the number served or the certified enrollment?
You get paid off of certified enrollment, but then you charge the other district for the. So we're gonna see more money this year coming in, and then next year we'll probably get on that budget guarantee.
Depends on.
Yeah.
I do want to make sure I heard one thing right. You said, we've been graduating classes of 60, 70 kids. And our younger classes, first grade, second grade, third grade, they're in the 40s,
40s or 50s.
40s or 50s. Although that's fairly consistent through elementary right now?
Yeah. So I can just go through. Kindergarten is at 55. First grade is at 39. Second grade is at 41. Third grade is at 35. Fourth grade is at 46. Fifth grade is 56. Sixth grade is 55. Seventh grade is 70. Eighth grade is 62. Ninth grade is 67. 10th grade is 57. 11th grade is 58. And 12th grade is 47. So we've had, 7th grade is our highest group at 70. And then we have a couple of 67, 65, 62s in there. High 50s, but our incoming classes are 39, 40,
Half the
35, 46. And I think this is no surprise to anyone on the board, but I think the challenge is affordable housing in our district. When you're talking about young families, having affordable housing that's available and available is key. And that's not something that, I know that a lot of our towns are working on that and seeing some, progress, but that's tough because those are our kindergarten parents. So.
Yeah, I see houses getting built all around me, but they're all my age or older.
Yes. Not that they wanted to bring 6 kids into the district, that'd be
Right.
okay, but
Right.
yeah. It's tough because you see like a Waukee or, and their boom is $200, $250, $300 family homes, which we call now starter homes.
Crazy.
And you look in our districts, and we had a teacher family that was going to come here, and I remember the wife telling me, where would we live? Where do teachers live in our district? Because there are very few houses for sale in our communities, in our actual towns, and then housing outside is typically a farmstead or some sort of rural acreage, which sometimes has a higher dollar value. So that was a concern: is where would we even live? And so they went to a different district. So. We had a family that left our district. Was that you that was mentioning that? Left our district because they couldn't find housing. So, some of this we can help with, but some of it's just, kind of our communities as well.
Based on the enrollment data, we shouldn't change any of the early retirement options because we're barely in need of funds or anything like that, need to save money.
No, but what we will see is next year, depending on COVID, obviously,
Sure.
there's that X factor that we haven't planned on. But several of our elementary classes will not have 3 sections. They'll have 2 sections. So to say that we would hire people who leave for attrition might not be true, because we might not, if we have a class of 41, we won't have 3 sections, where this year we are because we're doing the social distancing in those classrooms, and it's because we had the gap.
Okay.
So I think it was a good educational practice, but assuming that kids are that much closer to bridging that gap, and we only have 41 students, let's say in second grade, it won't be a 3-section, it'll be a 2-section. So it might be that we don't even hire some of our, our early retirees back because of those numbers.
Any other questions on the enrollment data? Not hearing any, we will move on to the outsourcing of custodial work.
So one of the things that we've been working with our custodial staff on is we are short 2 full-time individuals plus our maintenance position, which has been posted for, I want to say, over 8 months, has not been filled yet. So one of our custodians actually, when he has time, is able to do some maintenance, but not the maintenance that, the number of requests that we have. So our challenge is that we've had advertisements for the last 6 months, maybe last 7 months, for custodial positions, and we're just not getting applicants. We're not, even if we are getting applicants, it might not work out for them. It might not be what they thought it was, and so we're not keeping some of our applicants. We've hired some good people since we started this, but we've also had some leave. So one of the challenges we have is when you look at the amount of what we're asking custodians to do this year, with the extra sanitizing, the extra lunchroom that we had to add for social distancing, trying to provide a wrestling spot for our kids, all of those things take manpower to do. And we don't have it. We're not getting applicants. So what I propose to our custodial team, to our labor management committee, is that we look at outsourcing part of our custodial work until we can get those positions hired. So the recommendation we're going to go with is a company called Smart Clean Services. I did give you a cost comparison sheet for the 3 companies that gave us bids, and those are the 3 companies that we had talked to. And I'll kind of walk through why we're asking for you to consider Smart Clean. This one actually looks like it's the best price, but we'd have to lock in for a full year. And we don't, that's not the intent. The intent is to give our custodians relief until we can get people hired. And so as soon as we hire people, the intent is that we would start to phase out of the contract for the outsourcing. It's not meant to be a solution long term. It's meant to be kind of a stopgap until we can get people on staff trained and in our system. So that Vanguard contract is not appealing for that. We don't want to lock into a year. So that leaves us with Smart Clean and this Cleaning Connection. Pretty comparable when you look at the different areas. So the elementary in both areas is a little over $4,000 a month. And they break down almost the same as to what they're going to provide for services. We ask them to give us kind of an apples-to-apples comparison. If you mop the floor 3 times a week, if you do this and this, so we have that breakdown. Our recommendation would probably be that we hire out the cleaning services for the high school or the middle school, one or the other. It's 2 people that would come in. We'd still have our crew here as well. The company is actually responsible for their crew. We did talk about what that could look like, and we talked about doing it in zones would be better, so that if they did the high school wing, if there were problems, we'd know who to contact. They're in charge of the background checks. We made sure that they were the same caliber as the background checks we provide. They are responsible for insurance, all of those things. So we looked at either the middle school or the high school. I think our custodians had a great point. They said, our custodians are kind of what people expect to see, who they expect to see here on game nights, and if they have questions at events, and so we want to make sure that they're visible. And these areas that we're talking about having them clean is they would just do that. So they really wouldn't need to be in any other parts of the building. So our outsourcing recommendation is to do one of the sections, not all three. So we're looking at either the middle school probably or the high school. If you approve this, then Mr. Irwin and Mr. Gray from the custodial team and I are going to sit down and look at how we divide up then our responsibilities for our current staff and what it looks like when we get people hired and how we phase out of this. So we'll do a letter of understanding with the labor management group, and they're actually very appreciative that we're trying to give some relief. They can't keep doing what they're doing. I mean, it's just not possible. So our recommendation is that we use Smart Clean. And the only reason why I have it as generic as that is because we haven't determined if it's going to be middle school or high school yet. So it'll be one of the two, but it won't be both. So when you approve it, it's just to do the contract with Smart Clean for whatever wing of the building the custodial group recommends. I mean, I know that's vague, but it's one of those two.
Yeah. Are these monthly numbers or weekly?
Yes, monthly numbers. So they're a little higher than what we would pay, but they also do transportation here. They would use all of our supplies. I mean, that's one of the things we said, if we're buying them, we want you to use consistent so we don't have questions about what's being used here versus there. They can use our equipment, but the intent is that we pick one of the wings, and that's what they're focused on.
And so when we talk about this being a temporary fill, do you have any kind of estimation on how long? I mean, I understand we've had issues with hiring, but
So we talked about that, and what does the phase out look like? Because if we get one person for a two-person job, we're not going to be able to let them go necessarily. So we talked about if we do hire one person, then we would use them, pull our person that's doing more custodial work now to do more maintenance. So we have that fill a little bit. And then when we hire the second person, then we would get rid of the outsourcing and shift the people who are here to cover that position. So, and then we're still working on a maintenance person. So no, I don't know. But the idea is we have a plan, and I think Mr. Irwin and I have talked a couple of different times about it, and they're in agreement. I think they understand why we need to look at this, and like I said, they were very thankful. They just want to make sure that our focus is on trying to build our staff, which it obviously is. So.
Is that one of the reasons that you're going with Smart Cleaning? I know you said because of the 30-day cancellation, but we've been advertising for, you said, 7 months and really had zero success.
Right.
So the odds of us having success before the end of the school year are probably fairly slim too.
Right. Maybe one.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I know we get people in, and some. The other challenge we have is some people apply and then they realize they can't work full time. You know, I think Cindy had the question, could we do a third shift? And we put that in for our next round of applicants. So if somebody wants to do a third shift, if we get 2 third shift people, great. We would assign them the group that, you know, like the middle school, and we wouldn't need to do the outsourcing. But I don't know how realistic that is.
Well, I think if we go with the year contract, it'll look a lot more threatening to Kenny and the staff and everybody else, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so, not saying that, you know, eventually we may have to go if nobody doesn't want to, yeah.
At least in one section.
Right.
Right.
Or if we had a situation like last spring where we closed, you wouldn't want to keep paying them just because you're locked in a contract. Some schools got caught up like that.
Oh, that's actually a really good point.
Because they thought
very
FEMA was going to pay for it, and then FEMA stopped paying. So now they have a contract through the whole year that they can't get out of.
Oh.
We don't want to think like that, Ted. It's a great point, but we don't want to think like that.
It happens.
My kids are going to school.
Well, I don't mean that way.
It happened once, didn't it, Ted?
He
Yeah.
gets stuck with a contract. Right. You know.
It makes sense, yeah.
But either way you look at it, if you look at The Smart Clean, I mean, it's comparable to the others,
Right.
so.
Well, and yeah, that cleaning connection, I wasn't sure why their high school was so much higher. But.
All right, so this will require a motion and a second and a vote to approve. And I'd entertain that at any point when the discussion is over.
I'll move to approve the outsourcing of some of our custodial work on a month-to-month basis.
And I'll second that.
Can you mention that it'll be Smart Clean in that motion?
That
please?
contract will be with Smart Clean,
Thank you.
All right,
to be determined.
and your second still stands with
Yes,
the
yes.
addition?
Mhm.
All right, it's been properly moved and seconded that we offer the contract to Smart Clean for some of the custodial work. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Early graduation applicants.
So we have two.
This requires a motion and a second to approve the 2 early graduates, which for some reason I've not been able to open.
And clearly, they've met the requirements, you know, for graduation.
Correct.
And you're recommending them for early graduation?
Correct. They both had to submit their application and their reasons why. Did you guys, were you able to open it?
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought they were both legitimate. I think
Yeah.
they, you know, had fair points and they met all the requirements that we require, so.
Feels like they both put a lot of thought into it and they're making the decision for the right decision, for themselves.
Nice reasons, yeah.
Yeah.
I make a motion to approve the early graduation applicants, the 2.
I'd second that.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the 2 early graduate recommendations. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Now, move on to sub-pay rate increase.
So one of the things that the Labor Management Committee and I have talked about a couple of different times is just trying to get some of our services, compensation, more equitable with other districts that are surrounding us. So if you remember last spring, we talked about increasing our ticket taker money. If you remember, they would work for 3 hours and make $15, which was well below minimum wage. And so we increased it to $15 an hour, I believe, or no, that's not right.
Is it $9 now?
$9 an hour for as many hours as you work. And so it's more equitable. I think that our sub pay is along the same lines. We tried to figure out when the last time it increased. It's been at least 7 years, but maybe longer. And we're low. There are some districts that are where we are, but we also have some districts that are increasing their sub pay significantly because of our shortage. I think Osceola Clark is at $150 a day. And that's just for not even an extended sub. I think their extended subs were at $190. We saw several that were at $130. So this puts us probably on the high end of some of the schools in our conference, but it does put us competitive with other districts that are around us. So the recommendation that I'm asking is that we increase our sub pay from $105 to $130 per day, and then our long-term sub increasing that pay from $154.50 to $170. And then with that, we would increase our custodial staff, our cooks and our associates, 50 cents an hour on their sub rate. And then our bus drivers are already at the entry level that we pay bus drivers, so we would not make a recommendation to increase theirs. Or the recommendation does not increase theirs. And I should mention that most of our sub pay, if we code it correctly, comes out of some of our categorical funds. So teacher professional development, teacher leadership. So it's not necessarily going to be a hit to our general fund because we can allocate those funds accordingly to offset the increase.
All right, this item does require a motion and a second before we can vote to approve an increase in substitute pay.
I'll make a motion that we increase the sub-teacher pay rate from 105 to 130, the sub-teacher long-term pay rate from 154.50 to 170, and the custodial staff cooks and associates increases sub rate 50 cents an hour. Do I need to include the last one saying? Okay.
I will second that.
All right, it's been properly and moved and seconded that we increase the sub pay rate as recommended. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? All right. All right, that brings us to the end of the agenda. I don't want to keep anybody here longer, but I do want to say thank you to everybody. I appreciate all of my fellow board members and the school administration, all the staff and volunteers, and most definitely all the students. We are extremely lucky to be where we're at in terms of everybody being in the building. I mean, I understand we have some that aren't right at the moment, but they'll be coming back, and you know, this year looks different, but it's a good year. So, does anybody have anything else? All right, our next meeting is scheduled for November 23rd at 6 p.m. in the same location we are now. I would take a motion to adjourn.
We adjourn.
I'll second that.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we go into adjournment. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Thanks, everybody.